You got to do some self-work. You got to evaluate why you failed or why you weren't successful at your goal. You have to find ways to find some solitude and really evaluate where you are, and so you can have peace in your soul. And then you have to turn around and continue to cast some vision. Continue vision cast, because you believe that it's going to invoke some hope. And then you got to show your work. You got to show that some gains are gained, some progress is being made. You have to consistently do this process over and over and over again. Why? Because if you Hi, everybody. Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and are listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee, where we're talking about life, leadership, and legacy. I want to help you unleash your capacity and level of leadership. I'm so excited that you are here for this episode. But before I get into my topic today, if you would go and subscribe to Leading with Lee on YouTube and all podcasting platforms, where I'm so excited that you're here. And I like to talk about leadership. And obviously, it's been an interesting time for me as I've been sharing about leadership. And I hope that you've been inspired over the most of this year as I've been talking about leadership. And this is like the final teaching that I'm going to do, or talk that I'm going to do for Leading with Lee. And then I'll do a recap on the next episode. But this is today, I have a subject today that I think is pretty interesting. But before I share too much about it, I'm just going to give you my leadership definition. I give it every single episode when I'm actually talking or doing a talk on here. And so I hope that it inspires you. And my leadership definition is this. I believe that leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, personal processes, and organizations in that direction. Leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. About 6 years ago, many of us who may have been following the Marvel Cinematic Universe remember that they were capping off a long-running story related to the Avengers. As we know, there were two movies that came out in 2018 and 2019. There was a two-part of saga of or a cap of an era, particularly in the MCU, where the Marvel put out two movies, the Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And these two movies had such an interesting impact on the culture at the time. We saw all these superstars, all of these characters that we have been dealing with over that last decade or so, had literally a decade, had come together to stop the villain Thanos. Thanos is a character in the Marvel Universe who was set out to try to purge the world because he believed that it was in the best interest of the creation at the time. And so what ended up happening in this movie, it's not a spoiler if you haven't seen it yet. I mean, man, you're 6 years too late. But if you haven't seen it yet, pretty much in the first movie, they are in a fight with Thanos. Thanos has now beginning to capture all of the Infinity Stones, and we see how Thanos begins to gain strength as he's captured all of these stones throughout the time. And so he begins to start taking people out. He begins to start to take things from folks and do all these different things. And towards the end of the first movie, we see that he's able to do the snap. And we know the snap is impactful because literally half of humanity just disappears because Thanos has captured all the Infinity Stones. And now his goal was to purge the world, or purge the worlds of half of creation. And this is a devastating blow to the Avengers. This is a devastating thing that has happened. And literally we see throughout in the next movie, it was 5 years had passed and so much had transpired in those 5 years, and half of the Avengers disappeared and so many things had transpired. And it made me think about just kind of the moment that we are in right now, where our country's experiencing some transition. is experiencing some transition. There are different things that are happening as we go towards the end of the year, and so many situations are transpiring. And this tends to be a tricky time for people because we're going into the holidays and we're trying to navigate what we feel, and people are trying to navigate some uncertainty because they're not sure what this holiday season is going to look like, what next year is going to look like, and you may have that thought process in your mind. What is it going to look like? And it led me, as I was thinking about those movies, to bring up this topic that I believe will be encouraging to you today. And my topic today is leading beyond difficult moments. Leading beyond difficult moments. Now, I got 4 points that I want to give to you, and I hope they inspire you, and I hope that they will be a bit of an encouragement to you as we are talking about leading beyond difficult moments. So my 4 points today is: number one, failure allows us to evaluate. Number two, finding solitude is essential. Number three, continuing to cast vision invokes hope. And number four, some games are gains. So let's do with the first one today, which is failure allows us to evaluate. We see this quite often in sports. When a team goes on a losing streak, that they are failing to meet the mark, those team owners or that team in general begins to evaluate their prospects. They assess the team's rosters. They look at the coaching staff, whether or not they need to make changes. They begin to look at training and personnel and all those different aspects, and to try to pinpoint why they are not winning the way they want to win. And teams do this every few years. They're trying to look at how can we better ourselves and either sustain our winning streak or get on one. And so we saw that with the now reigning WNBA champion New York Liberty team. The New York Liberty earlier this summer won the WNBA title, and their owners is Joe and Claire Tsai. This couple in particular bought the franchise back in 2019. They are the owners of the Brooklyn Nets, and so they went on ahead and bought the New York Liberty, the storied franchise that has been in the WNBA since its founding. It's one of the longest lasting franchises in the league, and they bought this team and began to invest. And on the personnel side, they began to invest into better facilities and resources to help the team. They even moved the team from playing in upstate New York to playing in the same arena at the Barclays Arena, which is where the Brooklyn Nets play. And so they began to do some things to shift the team from a player side. They drafted Sabrina Ionescu in the 2020 WNBA draft and brought the stars like Breanna Stewart, and they started to inch closer and closer to a championship. This franchise has never, in its 20-something odd year history, the 20-plus year history, it had never won a championship. They might have appeared or come very close to winning a title, but it had never won a championship. And then back in 2023, they won the Commissioner's Cup. They got closer to a league title, and they won the Commissioner's Cup in an in-season tournament. And then this year, they won their first title in franchise history. And I thought this was really interesting because one of the things that we have to recognize as we're trying to become better in our lives, we have to look at what is causing us to miss the mark, what is causing us to not hit the goals that we want to hit, what is actually causing us to fall short of some of the things that we're trying to accomplish in this life. And I think that's super important for you and I as we're trying to move forward, as we are evaluating how 2024 went for us. It is going to be a helpful thing to evaluate, hey, what are some things where I fell short? Whether it was going to the gym or being consistent in my diet, whether it is in the classroom or your relationships or in your business or whatever the case might be for you, what did I not do well, and how can I move towards being better at the thing that I'm working on? It's really essential that we take some time to evaluate, because let's be clear, all of us didn't have a perfect year. This might have been the best year of your life, but in some area of your life, you may have felt like your year was not as successful as it possibly could have been. You may have felt like, man, I'm not doing all the things that I need to do. I have failed to hit the mark on some things that I feel really strongly about. And you may have asked yourself what it would look like for you to be able to hit those goals. And what I want to encourage you in this conversation is that in order to hit those goals, you got to evaluate. The guest I had on here a few weeks ago were my pastors, and they talked about evaluation, have the humility to evaluate, having the capacity to say, you know what, we're doing some things well, but there's a lot of things we could be doing better. I can actually look back and say, well, I may or may not be hitting the mark on these particular things. I may not be being as successful as I could be because I haven't taken the time to really evaluate. Evaluations are not bad. Evaluations are a way for us to acknowledge where we are and where we can go. And so it's going to be essential for you and I to take some time to evaluate, to really look at what is happening in our lives and what can we do to get better and get stronger in that regard, because evaluation is going to be helpful for us. And I think one of the greatest things you can do for yourself is just learn. It's learn. I say it in the first Leading with Lee, and I'll still say it to this day, that leaders are learners. They're people that acknowledge that they have not made it yet. They have not gotten to all of their goals. And it's really essential that you recognize that in your life, that you can grow, that you can move forward, that you can go in a new direction if only you would acknowledge your failures. If only you would look at the fact that you haven't done it all correctly. And so therefore, because I have not done it correctly, I'm going to evaluate. I'm going to do an analysis of what's happening in my life, because I want to get better at it. I want to be able to be more effective at what I do. And so therefore, I'm going to take some time. The owners of the New York Liberty realized that the team needed to get better. They made some investments. They paid money. They engaged in some ways to try to build a team and make it better, because they felt like if we invest, they might have a chance at the title. And this team did incredible this year. They had the best record for most of the season in the WNBA. But it was because their ownership took some time to invest. The ownership took some time to say, you know what, we're going to do what we need to do over the next few years to ensure that we finally, after 25 years, win a league title. And that's what they did. And they were able to find their niche and find their lane in order to get to the goal that they needed to get to, because they were willing to acknowledge their failure. The next thing I'm going to talk about is finding solitude is essential. Life is really stressful, and we all have to find a way to ease our minds in the busyness of life. Now, you may be asking, what is the definition of solitude? Because we don't hear this word used a lot, but solitude is defined as the state or situation of being alone. The state or situation of being alone. Now, this is a fascinating thing to talk about, because if you really be honest about it, there's several aspects to solitude that can be really tricky. But I want to talk about it from this perspective, that as I was doing my research, some researchers have expressed that there's some benefits to solitude. It reduces stress. It can increase creativity. If you take some time to do that, by engaging in solitude, it can ultimately it can also create greater autonomy. So actually taking some time for yourself can actually reduce the busyness in your life. It increases creativity. Actually getting away is really important. There's a quote that I saw it says, in solitude, the mind gains strength and learns to lean into itself. Lawrence Stern said that. He said, I thought it was really profound, because he says, if you link by taking some time to get away, you can lean into your mind. You can actually look into your soul and actually try to find something new to discover in your life, because you took the time to get quiet and get away and give yourself some space. And that's really important, because you and I need that. We need some opportunities to expand our mind or really remove all of the noise. Remove all of the distractions so that we can think about what we're thinking about. So we can analyze our thoughts and analyze our perspectives and really get down to the core of what we need to learn. What's interesting about this is that it's not something that comes inherently easy for individuals. It's something that you have to learn to do. But also it acknowledges, these researchers also acknowledge that there's some negative implications if you are in solitude for too long. But all in all, it can help. Spending too much time isolated can be dangerous for you because it is important that you and I have some engagement with community. One of the things that people are looking for in our society and culture, and I've talked about this before on here, is that people are looking for identity and community. They want to feel like they belong to something. So therefore, they're going to try to find it somewhere. This is a reason why I'm talking about this at this particular time, because statistically, we see depression rates and suicide rates and all these different things go up during the holidays because people are experiencing a lack of connection, a lack of inclusion, a lack of engagement with other people. And so therefore, what ends up happening is they start to become depleted in their souls. They start to feel as if they do not have somewhere to be. And you and I can really, really think about this in a unique way. And I hope that you'll be motivated to look at solitude a different way. I don't want you to get too focused on being alone that you fail to connect, but also recognize that you need that balance in your life. Because one of the things that is true is, I thought this quote was really powerful by May Starden. She says that loneliness is the poverty of the soul, but solitude is the richness of the soul. In other words, what she's saying is being lonely, as we just talked about, not engaging people, being in a space where you are lacking the engagement in order for you to become a more beautifully connected person and causing you to not engage with people, it tends to make you more sad and lonely. Disengagement makes you sad and lonely. But what she's saying is you being intentional about self-evaluation, you've been intentional about solitude, can actually do something for your soul. So what am I saying to you? Am I saying that spending time with yourself is inherently a dangerous thing? No, not at all. That's a good thing. But what I'm also saying to you is that if you are not intentional in your loneliness or in your solitude, it will turn to loneliness. It will. You have to be intentional about, what am I going to do in my time alone? Am I going to read? Am I going to learn a new skill? Am I going to work out? Am I going to listen to music or listen to people share about different things? Am I going to watch videos? Like, what am I going to do to occupy my time so that I can find solace or peace in my soul? Because the reality is, in order to operate in solitude, it has to be purposeful. You cannot seek solitude without purpose. Because if it's aimless, you will automatically fall into the trap of loneliness. This is where anxiety comes from. Anxiety is a result of feeling like I am not settled or I have nothing to aim for. Anxiety is a result of people feeling like I have no way to connect. And one thing that you and I need to be really, really, really careful of is spending all of our time not recognizing how to use our moments of silence well. Trust me, we are in the rat race all the time. Everybody's trying to, because I shared it a few weeks ago. I talked about how dangerous our phones can be sometimes, how We spend so much time dealing with social media and seeing people's lives in front of us that we literally become so caught up with trying to keep up with the Joneses, as they say, trying to look or feel or operate as if we're just like everybody else. And to be honest, it's not going to be helpful for you if you spend all of your time doing that. There has to be a development of your self-confidence and your self-value that allows you to live in a level of freedom in your life. Because the reality is life is hard and difficult. You are going to have difficult moments. You're going to have some stuff happen in your life that is not going to be fun. There's going to be losses. There's going to be failure. There's going to be things that happen, but you have to find a moment in your life to rest and find solitude and say, hey, how do I reset my thoughts? How do I reset my conception of what's happening right now? How do I reset what's going on around me? How do I do it? How do I do it? Because if I don't do it, I won't survive. I'll fall into the trap of loneliness. I won't believe that people care about me or believe in me. I'll fall into the trap of thinking that nothing matters for me. And that's not true. It really does matter that you spend some time considering all the realities. That you spend some time considering how is it that you are going to bring your mind and your emotions and your life into a space so that you can feel some level of peace. People are looking for peace. Their economic anxiety that they feel is not about the economics or the money that's in their pocket. It is about peace. The social anxiety to being around people or people that don't like you or people that like you or all these different things, these situations you walk into, whether it's at work or at school or wherever you go, in the grocery store. Some of it that you're feeling has nothing to do with the environment that you're in. It has everything to do with your ability to find peace. You're trying to figure out how I just find some solitude. How can I find some space where I do not feel as if I am being beat up and beat down and pushed around and just stressed out about every aspect of life? If I'm being honest, there's some aspect of my life where I feel that way. I feel that way in a lot of ways. There are things that my wife and I are experiencing right now as we're trying to navigate different aspects of life, of just being married, being in our 30s and being married, us thinking about some of the realities of the things that we are experiencing in our lives, and us coming from two different having an intercultural marriage and coming from two different parts of the world. Like these are some anxieties. There's so many moments where I could just be like, man, I really don't know what to do. I can just get stressed out. It's so easy for me to get stressed out. Like, it's super easy about the most minute stuff. And it's a byproduct of not being able to find solace sometimes. This is really something that we all have to strive for. It's essential. It's essential that you find some spaces where you can find some peace. And I know that's hard. Let's be clear. We got to acknowledge this because this is true. Sometimes finding peace is a privilege. It is. There are people that have the resources to have peace. There are people that may watch this or listen to this. You may have the resources to have some peace because you know where your next meal is going to come from. You know that your lights are still going to be on. You know that all these things are happening. But there are people who are not sure. They're not sure if they can pay their bills. They're not sure if they can actually get to the next step or get the next meal or drink water or whatever. Like they are unsure about the outcomes. And so we have to contend for this thing called solitude. Got to contend for it. We got to figure out how to get to a place where we can find some peace in our souls and really, really move forward in our lives. Because solitude is essential. I'm going to take a moment right here and I'll be right back after this message. Want to promote your business, products, or services? Email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com. I would love to push forward the banner of what you're trying to accomplish, whether it is a product, whether it's your services or your business. I would love to work with you and be an advocate for what you're doing in your respective spaces. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you. And we are back. I'm so grateful that you're here and have been inspired by this idea of leading in difficult moments, because I think there's a lot of difficult moments that you will have in your life where you have to lead, where you have to say, hey, I'm going to do what I need to do to get forward in this moment. So let's just continue this conversation. And with my next point, and that's number 3, is continuing to vision cast invokes hope. Continuing to vision cast invokes hope. Winston Churchill is somebody I've talked about here on Leading before. He was the prime minister of Britain in 2 different times of history, but the most significant time he was known for being prime minister was during World War II. And there is a speech that he gave right after Nazi Germany had invaded France and Belgium in the summer of 1940. And during the speech, he shares some really profound things. He talks about fighting on the beaches and all these different things. And he basically is imploring his country to not be afraid, to stand up and rally in this time. He gives speeches a few different times. There are different reports that he gave this speech several times. He gave it on the radio and did a recording of it later. But he really used this moment to talk to his nation about not backing down and not giving up. And one of the things that leaders have to do is continue to vision cast to invoke hope. You have to continue to say the right thing or say the things that matter to invoke hope. And it doesn't mean that you are operating as if you are being unrealistic, right? It doesn't mean that you are operating as if the reality of life is not happening around you, because I think that that's counter to the truth. What it means is that you are doing what you need to do to say, hey, though these things are happening, though these are realities around me, I'm going to speak hope and encourage people to stick in there, even though the odds are stacked against us. This act of motivation is something that we can learn from. Like any good leader, whether you are a coach or a parent or someone who has any influence, you have the ability to push and encourage people to be hopeful. That is essential in this life. You have to be hopeful. You have to have a disposition that suggests that I'm going to be hopeful. I think about the reality of me being an African American in this country and how, if I look at our history, in particular for African Americans, there is some complicated realities as a part of our history. This is not, and let me be very clear, it's not a criticism or going on a tangent about, some social thing. But I was thinking about this the other day as I was talking to a friend of mine about how there's a disposition among African Americans in this country in some ways, even though in the midst of having a lot of anxiety and fear and feeling all these realities that our people face, there's a streak of hopefulness that we tend to have. And a lot of it comes from the history of the Black church. And I'm not going to get really deep into it, but there's something about hope dealing or encouraging people to be hopeful that tends to drive up response in our communities. There are people that begin to do things a little bit more because they are starting to hope. I think about it for me personally, how I've seen different situations happen with family and friends and folks who I know very dearly, and how their response almost was baffling, because you have that moment where it's like, how can you be nice or be kind about this situation, or how can you be grateful about this situation, and yet with all the odds stacked against you, all the things that have transpired, all the things that are disconcerting, you still have hope. I was just sitting here thinking about of a situation that happened a few years ago where a police officer killed this black man, both in Jean, and his family, in the midst of their sorrow, in the midst of their pain, in the midst of their suffering, chose to treat this police officer who was clearly wrong, did something that literally uh, went into the wrong house, and this man loses his life, and his family is gracious to this cop, to this woman, this officer. It's another situation with the Charleston Nine, where all of these folks who invited this young man, who so happened to be a person who was self-described as a neo-Nazi, and he goes into the church and he has prayer with these folks and engages with these people in Charleston, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and he's in these people's church. They pray with them and engage them, and he kills 9 people. And even at this young man's trial, these families show him grace. Like, you have to understand, that's not a easy thing to do. You're choosing to be gracious. You're choosing to cast a vision of hope, even when you don't have to do that. These people have the right to be bitter or upset. And who would blame them? Yet, they chose to invoke an attitude of hope. They chose to not respond in a way that was warranted. Even though there might have been anger or anguish in the midst of that, they still chose to operate with hope, with kindness, with faith, with a perspective that says, you know what, even though you don't deserve this from me, I'm gonna be gracious to you. I'm going to still invoke hope. I'm still going to be hopeful in this situation. This is a difficult time for me and my family. I'm still going to be hopeful. That's what they're saying. This literally what these folks are saying. They're saying, hey, listen, you took our family member's life, but I'm still going to have hope. You took something from me that was innocent. They didn't ask to lose their lives, but these people still had hope, and they began to treat these people in a way that is mind-boggling. You can't do that unless you got hope. You can't do that unless you have an anchor of hope. Let's be clear. Hope is not something that we operate in that suggests that we're living outside of reality. That's not what I'm saying. Hope gives you the ability to say, you know what? In spite of the reality, I'm still going to believe that something can be different. That's what Winston Churchill did. That's what these families did of victims did. This is what they did. They chose to operate differently in the midst of being in a hopeless situation. They decided to cast vision. They decided to vision cast. They said, you know what? We're not going to operate in fear or anxiety or anger or whatever the case might be for them, numbness. We're not going to do that. We're going to be hopeful. That takes courage. That is something that you and I have to recognize. This has to be something that is just deeply rooted in your soul to be able to do that. You just can't just do that. You have to have a set of values that makes you operate in a way that says, you know what? In spite of this moment, in the midst of what's happening, I'm going to do what I need to do to have hope. I'm just going to have hope because I believe in something bigger than this moment. And my last point, some games are games. We're in a moment where so many people are fed up with systems. They're tired of systems. People don't trust systems because they don't believe that these systems work for them. They don't think that the quote unquote system is going to do what's in their best interest. And I think it's essential for us to think about this, that as leaders, we have to acknowledge that things are not working or not working to the best of its ability. Whether it's your business, your family dynamics, relationships, etc., you have to look at what's happened. Because we think systems means like, things that are outside of control. No. Your family has a system. Your business culture has a system. Your business has a system. Your relationships has a system. There's a way in which you operate in them. It just is. And so you have to be willing to say, hey, something's not working. You got to be willing to acknowledge. Again, we go going back to our first point. You got to acknowledge the failure. You have to acknowledge it. You just can't acknowledge it for yourself. You have to articulate to people who saw you fail, hey, I failed. I didn't do this right. I could have done this better. I could have been more efficient in how I operated in that regard. But here's the main point that I want to make about this. It made me think about how in grade school, most of us remember in elementary school how we had, or grade school, we had to do math problems. And a lot of times when you're doing third or fourth grade math or fifth grade math, your teachers would often tell you to show your work. You had the problem, but they always had a space on those worksheets where you had the math problem. And then right below the math problem they may have a breakdown of how you can show your work. You and I have to recognize that if we're going to lead people or engage people in a powerful way, we have to show our work. So what does that mean? If you're in a relationship, you need to show your work. Hey, you don't get brownie points for just saying that I'm doing something. No. Show your work. There needs to be tangible evidence that something is changing as a result of what you're doing. Because it's a disservice to claim something and you have no evidence that it's true. We live in an environment where literally people need to see your work. I can say all day that I love my wife, but if she does not see or have tangible evidence, it means nothing. It's just words. And what's important for you and I to recognize is that we got to show our work. They got to see you doing it. I say it all the time in conversations with people. Sometimes you got to get caught trying. You have to get caught trying. Hey, if you're going to the gym, there got to be some evidence, man. I talk about working out pretty often on here. I have a lot of inconsistencies. There's evidence of that. You can see it. My wife can see it. My friends can see it. People in my life see it. Because there's a lack of consistency. But if I was consistent, you'll be able to see my work. You'll be able to see it. You'll see it in how I move and how I talk and how I operate. My body changes as a result of me showing my work. On your job, I know that there's some of people may be watching, so listen to this. Maybe you're the owner of a business or you work for a business and you're hitting your quotas and you're trying to get all those different things in order. You got to show your work. There's a reason why they have evaluations at the end of the year. You're showing your work. That's what it is. You have to show that you have put in the time. You have put in the effort for people to find you credible. Some gains are gains. You have to be willing to show people something. We live in a time that's very visual. Like, you can't have hypothetical wins. You can't have I don't know how to describe it, but you can't have theoretical wins. People got to see it, man. If you saying that you're a good father and a good friend and all those different things, people got to see it. If you say that you're good at playing a sport or good at managing your money, people got to see it, man. We live in a social media driven environment. Sis, people got to see it. The reason why people might know Leading with Lee is because they're seeing it. Do I always post on social media like I'm supposed to? No, I don't. I'll clearly admit to that. But the reality is, they can go on to Instagram. They can go onto YouTube. People can go into different spaces and see my work. They can go back to 2020 and see the work that's been done over the past 4 years or so. They can watch the recording from the first Leading with Lee in 2019 and see my work. They can see it. It's on YouTube. Like this, you have to understand that you have to be more than just a person that speaks words. You have to be a person of your word. My dad always taught me this, that my word is my bond. If I say that I'm going to do something, I need to do it. If I can't do it, I need to be honest about it. Hey, I couldn't do it this time. I just couldn't do it. I thought I could, but I couldn't do it. This is what's essential in this moment of difficulty. You got to do some self-work. You got to evaluate why you failed or why you weren't successful at your goal. You have to find ways to find some solitude and really, really evaluate where you are. And so you can have peace in your soul. And then you have to turn around and continue to cast some vision. Can you vision cast? Because you believe that it's going to invoke some hope. And then you got to show your work. You got to show that some gains are gains. Some progress is being made. You have to consistently do this process over and over and over again. Why? Because if you do this process, I believe that you will start to see the outpour of your dedication to some of these principles. Like these things are not just something I just came up with. These are things that I've been thinking about, doing some research about, and really considering, because I think in our time right now, we need people that are willing to have some humility about where they are. That's something I've been talking about this whole season of Leading. The underpinning of the conversation that we've been having is about humility. It's about recognizing where we are. It's about seeing ourselves as a part of a bigger story. And leaders have to recognize that. You have to recognize that you're a part of a bigger story. Hey, when I talk about leaders, I'm not talking about just somebody that has a position I've always said this on leading. Hey, you that are watching this or listening to this right now, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to somebody that has a title. I'm talking to you. You. Yes, you who are listening to this or watching this right now. Hey, you mom. Hey, you student. Hey, you business owner. Hey, you father. Hey, you brother. Hey, you whatever your position is, I'm talking to you. Yes, you. You're the person I'm talking to. You are a leader. Stop looking for leadership in other people. It's you. You're the one that has to make the decision to be effective. John Maxwell says that leadership is influence. You are influencing somebody and something is influencing you. That's really important. So as I'm ending right now, but I want you to know this. There are going to be difficult times. There are going to be times where it doesn't work. It's not going to seem that easy. But what you do with those moments matter. What you do in those moments really matter. And right now is a moment that you can lead. Much love. And I'll see you next time here on Leading with Lee. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. If you want to get more information and connect with me, visit me at www.leeascott.com or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. So thank you for watching. Much love, and let's get started.